the area, like no tree in sight, you know. How people can live there is amazing to me. But the Bedouin know how to do it. They've lived there since biblical times.
If they planted trees, nothing would grow with that.
Yeah, they need water and everything else. The land just doesn't, like
Not enough rain.
if you can bring in irrigation the way the Israeli settlers do, the Israeli settlers take water from the Sea of Galilee in the north and run it through a whole system of pipes and then pipe it out to the lower West Bank, run it in all these little hoses and water trees.
In other words, it's got to be source. It's not a
Constantly
it's
supported,
not a natural rain.
Brendan, let's see more. Okay, so this is a sign talking about that place. That it says Sarora. So 2 years ago there was no sign, no one lived there, and it was really exciting for me to see that the people still live there. This is from the Palestine Authority based in Ramallah. They put up a sign. The people who lived there were very cynical about the Palestine Authority not doing anything more for them other than putting up a sign. They put up a sign, but not really helping them with much else. And you can see sheep and goats in the background. Next one, please. So this was our gang. I don't want to talk too much about exactly what we did, but it's kind of exciting to walk around with a t-shirt like that. And people really appreciate seeing it. Other people don't appreciate seeing it. Right, keep going.
Like the one you got on.
Oh, yeah, this is it. I don't know. Anyway. So, the specific project that we did, besides being split up in these different villages, this year, you know that we were involved in repairing a road. So this is a community. Several people live there. They do a little bit of farming down in the valley. They have their flocks or their herds. And there's this one dirt road that's probably been there for centuries. And it's their way in and out. And they're not allowed to build anything. But we could fix it. We weren't building anything. We were just fixing something that was already there. And the reason that's important is these people and other people that live down in those hills are what's holding on to that land and keeping it from being taken over by settlers. The settlers harass them like crazy. The man who lives here, he spoke with a very strange voice. His voice was really odd. And someone told us later that he was shot in the face by a settler. He was in a hospital rehabilitating like for a year. And when he got out, he's okay, but his voice never got normal again. That's just an example. They're constantly harassed. This is called Bir el-Aid. It's such a tiny place you probably wouldn't find it on a map. Again, no electricity, no running water, there's one road, etc., etc. So let's just keep going to the next slide. Same place. Keep going. This is the dirt road, big rocks sticking up, big potholes, no lights, no nothing. If you have a sick child and you want to get out of there to go to a doctor or a hospital, or even if you want to buy water, buy food, like people can't produce everything, they have to go on this road. Imagine driving that at night, even if you happen to have a car. I mean, who has cars, right? So keep going, Brendan. So I just want to show you here, you can see another settlement on the hilltop. This settlement is absolutely illegal by Israeli law. Israel has allocated certain places for settlements. There's, I don't know, several hundred settlements that are legal settlements according to Israel. They're all illegal by international law. Canada considers them illegal. But this one is illegal by Israeli law, and there's over 100 settlements like that, where settlers just go out, plunk themselves down, take it. I'll get to you in a sec. And from the day they're there, immediately, they get electricity, they get water, the road gets paved. More important than anything, the army comes and protects them in massive force, right? Pretty soon they get a school, they might get a medical clinic. Of course, they get tax deductions for living in the dangerous places, you know. So that's an illegal settlement that has been there about 25 or 30 years. Just today, preparing for this talk, I read up on it a little bit, and even though it's completely illegal, the police superintendent lives in it. What does that tell us? So, very strategically, we went to fix this road right under their noses. And the people who did this planning, that again they worked on for months, the leadership was the Palestinians who live in those little villages and little places. They're the ones that said, we would love it if you would come and help us do this. They're aware of the risks. They know what will happen to them the day after we leave, or the week, or the month after we leave, the kind of retaliation they'll be subjected to. They know all about that, and they asked us to come. And they thought that this road itself is kind of like a linchpin, or a link to hold things together. So we planned what they called a win-win strategy, which means if we could stay there and fix the road, then the road gets fixed. But if the settlers do what we expect and call the army to get rid of us, then we get in the newspaper and people read about us all over the world. And that's actually what happened. So you can see our high technology solutions to road management here. And we just tried to fix the road a little bit, and before we even got there, the army was there waiting for us. We got there maybe 7 in the morning, or before 7 in the morning. So keep going, Brendan. I'm just giving you. This is some of the crew. I told you how young they are. They're awesome. They're really awesome. This is like, I just want to like cry when I think about them. It's just amazing that they're out there doing this. These are young Jewish women, like maybe they're 22, 24 years old, and that's what they're doing. It's awesome. So Brendan, next. This was early in the morning. You can see our high-tech thing. Buckets and scooping up gravel into the buckets and dumping it in the potholes. We could try that here in Hamilton if the city doesn't get on it quickly enough. And now I'm experienced. But Brendan, would you just bring up the next one? So after a rather short time, the army decided we shouldn't be there. And then what we were doing was perfectly legal. There's nothing illegal about helping Palestinians repair a road. But the army came when the settlers called, and they declared it a closed military zone. They have the authority to just declare anything a closed military zone, and then you're not allowed to be there. And they said, we have 10 minutes to get out. And we're like, we're not moving, right? So just keep going. It's, dramatic kind of scenes. There's a whole lot of dramatic scenes, but this really isn't so much what it's about. You can just, there's me in the corner there with the white hat.
Oh, yeah.
We practiced nonviolent direct action. We practiced sitting still. We practiced holding hands. We practiced singing. We practiced breathing deep. We had all that down really well. Something that we were surprised by, I was surprised by, is the army knew exactly who they were going for. They walked right past, I would say, all the Jewish activists, and they just grabbed Palestinians, hauled them out. And we also had divided ourselves into 2 teams. There was the red team that was like willing to risk arrest, and the green team that was like far away. They were supporting it, but they weren't going to get arrested, right? And some Palestinians felt okay getting arrested, and others stayed away.
What happens when they get arrested?
Well, some people said this was unprecedented. Often when Palestinians are arrested, they are held without trial, without charges, for up to 6 months at a time, something called administrative detention. That was instituted by the British when the British ran the mandate there. And Israel has kept that in effect. Some people are in prison even for years without ever even having a trial. It's just administrative detention. Out of here, Anyway, just do the next slide. So the unprecedented thing was, this time was very, very, unprecedented. Palestinians were kept together with us in the jail, and they were let out with us in the jail. And they didn't get longer or bigger punishments than we did. Anyway, this is part of what was going on. That's me.
Yeah.
And it was cool. Anyway, just keep rolling.
I got arrested on film.
So let me just try to catch up with my plan of what I was going to talk about. Time is slipping by as I'm talking and talking, but I think I've covered a lot. There's so much more to know, and I want to shift a little bit to talk about Canada and Israel and Palestine. Canada has been part of the problem, not part of the solution, right? You can see that somehow or another we gave a well to these people so that the women don't have to drop their buckets down and haul it up. But meanwhile, Canada is completely backing up Netanyahu and that whole program of depopulation, dispossession. Canada votes for Israel in the UN. There's been many times when there have been like resolutions in the UN Security Council, and like I'll just make up numbers. 200 countries vote one way, and Israel, the United States, Canada, and Palau and Micronesia vote the other way, or maybe Guatemala gets in there. Without going into a lot of detail, you can imagine it. Canada really backs up Israel. Canada gives something like $30 million a year to the Palestine Authority as aid, but almost all of it is used for the Palestine Authority's security apparatus.
Tax-free.
Which, no, just listen. It is our taxes. It's our taxes. It's called aid. It's given to the Palestine Authority, which is the quasi-governmental thing there. But almost all of it is used for the security apparatus to keep the Palestine Authority in place. It doesn't go to schools, doesn't go to food, doesn't go to medicine, doesn't go to, think of other good things it could go to. It goes basically to the police, the security forces. There are something like 7 different layers of security forces, presidential guards, and all these different things. That's where our tax money largely is going. I just want to mention a couple more things like this. Of all the countries in the world, Canada has a free trade agreement with Israel. The free trade agreement was just renewed, and this new free trade agreement does not take into account the fact that this whole area is conquered. It's not Israeli land. It's not Israel. The things produced there are not produced in Israel. Canada's stated foreign policy is to not recognize that occupation. But then it just passed a free trade agreement that gives the same status to goods produced in the West Bank under occupation as goods produced in Israel. No distinction between the two of them. And no concern about labor rights, no concern about environmental issues, right? So that Israelis actually do build factories in the West Bank and just dump any kind of environmental waste, exploit workers, and blah, 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 blah. So Canada just does this over and over again. Just another example is our government opposes BDS, which is a movement for individual people and institutions to boycott, sanction, and divest, to have some economic pressure on the Israeli occupation. Our government opposes that. There have been moves to declare it anti-Semitic, which is just an excuse to oppose it, to scare people. Our Prime Minister has said there should be no discussion of BDS anywhere on any campuses of universities in Canada. Just giving you some examples. When I was there about 2 weeks ago, the UN made an announcement. The United Nations World Food Program announced that Canada was making a contribution to the World Food Program to support food insecure Palestinians in Gaza and a vulnerable Bedouin in the West Bank. And I just was with the vulnerable Bedouin in the West Bank, so I took an interest in this. I looked up the details. So Canada's contribution was $2.4 million, and the press release said it was going to support 140,000 food insecure Palestinians. So do the math really quick. 2.4 million divided by 140,000. Less than $20 per person. So what does it cost to buy a large pizza with no toppings? This is Canada's way of helping Palestinians. So the end of my talk, I want to talk about some ideas of what I think we can do. So I think we have an opportunity here in Canada with elections coming in October. We have the possibility of influencing our government. Maybe that much, but if we can, let's go for it. With a relatively new leader in the NDP, Jagmeet Singh, I know that he is more open to support for Palestine and for human rights everywhere than previous NDP leaders were. Like any party leader, he has to see where the support is and what's going to work and what won't. Just to be brief, I think if people show up in the NDP and push for this kind of thing and make it clear that we want the NDP to take that kind of stand, there's more of a chance than there ever has been that the NDP can move in that direction. That was one thing I wanted to say. I think a lot, oh, and also we have a candidate here in this riding for the NDP, who I hope will win. I think his heart is in the right place. I also think, I know for sure, organizations, I'll just say it straight, the Jewish Federation here, the Jewish branch of the Center for Israel and Jewish Affairs, they're lobbying him, they're pushing him. Matthew Green, I think he needs to hear from the rest of us. And if he hears from enough of the rest of us, it'll let him know that he's safe speaking the truth about this stuff. He doesn't need to pretend otherwise in order to stay elected or get elected. So that's just another point I want to make. Another point I want to make is I think there's a lot of actual manipulation and propaganda and such that completely envelops the media and the public perception of public life in Canada, that if a politician criticizes Israel or speaks anything about Israel, they're going to be like schmeiced by the Jews, right? The Jews don't want that. So I brought some slides. I'll just show you this. This is the organization that I'm a part of, Brendan said he is a part of, Independent Jewish Voices, together with United Jewish People's Order, commissioned a very professional public opinion poll of Jews in Canada. February, we're only in May, this is just a few months ago, and I'll just read this out loud. On specific issues related to Israel-Palestine, Jewish Canadians are sharply divided, with high proportions opposing Israeli policies toward Palestinians. I'll read a little more, but I'm going to show you a few more slides like this. We need for our politicians to know this. More than a third have negative opinion of the Israeli government. Almost equal portions oppose and support the U.S. decision to recognize Jerusalem as the capital. Almost a third think the Palestinian call for boycott of Israel is reasonable. And 34% also oppose Parliament, Canadian Parliament, condemning those who endorse a boycott of Israel. So this, I think this is a reliable poll. We could read more, but let me just go on to the next slide, and I hope if you care enough, you'll look this up. So that was done by our organization. You know where we're coming from. That poll kind of confirmed stuff that we wanted it to confirm. We didn't manipulate it, but that's how it came out. This is a 2018 survey of Jews in Canada by the Jewish Federations, the Center for Israel and Jewish Affairs, I would say the other side, the big Jewish organizations that keep pushing that message, which clearly is not true, right? I don't know if you see this. It was Jewish Foundation in Manitoba, Federation CJA Montreal, blah, 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 Montreal, UJA, Federation of Greater Toronto. They did this study through, was it in Byronic, another very reputable survey organization. Go to the next slide, please. Byronic survey of Jewish Canadians confirms divisions on Israel and Palestine. I'll just try to read this really quickly. Canadian Jews are significantly divided on issues related to Israel-Palestine, with younger, Reform, and unaffiliated Jews holding the most critical views. They're bold. Nearly 3 times more Canadian Jews believe that West Bank settlements hurt Israel's security than believe the opposite. Most Canadian Jews do not believe the Israeli government is serious about making peace. 35% believe that Israeli settlements in the West Bank are illegal under international law, a position which rises to 40% among younger ones and more than 50% among those under 30. I'm showing this to you to kind of smash that myth that Jews support Israel, therefore Canadian politicians must support Israel. It's just not true. Let's just go to one more thing. I have a couple more things. So this was released on May 22nd. That was 5 days ago. A similar kind of a survey in the U.S. by an organization called the Jewish Electorate Institute, which is also trying to get a very objective, realistic, kind of sociologically valid understanding of what do Jews believe and think. So I just excerpted the summary here. On behalf of this thing, such and such research conducted a survey, blah, blah, blah. The results demonstrate that, that domestic issues dominate the policy priorities of the Jewish community as they determine which candidate to support in the 2020 election, as opposed to issues related to Israel, which remains the lowest policy priority of Jewish voters. Just go on to the next one. So they came up with 16 different policy priorities. Whatever that might be, health care, who knows, crime in the street, you can read the details. Israel came out number 16, meaning the Jewish voters care the least about that of 16 different issues that they were presented with. I think if you were to ask, the people who run the Liberal Party of Canada, oh, how do Jewish voters feel about Israel? They would rank that way up there. So I don't think American Jews are so different from Canadian Jews, right? This exact same poll has not been done here in Canada. But I think there is a message that we can try to convey to our members of Parliament. I would use some of this in talking with them. Yeah, I guess you can read it for yourself. Brendan, let's just get to the next one. I'm going into overtime here. Conclusion. Jewish American voters, including millennials, prioritize domestic policy issues that impact their lives. A candidate's stance on Israel is of relatively low importance to Jewish voters as they determine which candidate to support in the 2020 elections. Again, I want to apply this to Canada, apply it to our elections, and then after the elections, whatever government we have, whoever is representing us in Parliament, I think we need to get this message to them. One more, I might have another half dozen. This came out today. So why is our Canadian government acting the way it does? So there's this thing called the Center for Israel and Jewish Affairs. I've known about that since it got started. However, what I didn't know until today is a lawyer named Dimitri Laskaris got the information about registered lobbyists visiting members of our federal government from May 2018 to May 2019, and he did an analysis. What lobbyists visit our government? They have to report their visits. When they meet with an MP or a minister or someone in the bureaucracy, they have to say, such and such lobbyist visited this and this person, and they have to report it. Fortunately, we're in that kind of a democracy. So Dimitri Laskaris got all that, analyzed it, and he reported it on May 27th, 2019. So check this out. CJA, which is the Zionist lobby, filings show that within the past 12 months, its lobbying activities have far surpassed those of other major lobbying organizations in Canada. So let's just look here. Canadian Association of Petroleum Producers lobbied 121 times. Canadian Chamber of Commerce, 105 times. Canadian Bankers Association, you think they might want to influence the government, 54 times. The one Zionist lobby organization, 172 times, from last May until this month. Just keep rolling there. I just want to show something else. Who did they lobby? Of course they lobbied members of Parliament, they lobbied the ministers, they lobbied like everybody they can get their hands on. But Dimitri also found this. 22 visits in the course of 12 months to the Director of Operations of Global Affairs Canada. We need to drill into this and understand it better, but I would just say there's no wonder why the Canadian government does what it does. And what I would love to see us do is build like a kind of a counterbalance to that. I think, like I've said, elections coming up are an opportunity to raise Palestine as an issue, put it in a context of human rights everywhere. A government that will do the right thing in Palestine is probably likely to do the right thing in other places. And hold on a sec. Hold on. Can you hold on a sec?
It's in relation to what you were just talking about.
All right, wait. Well, let me just get this out of my head and into you, hopefully into yours. So recently, like I've been thinking, there are quite a few organizations that could possibly work together We are very small. The Independent Jewish Voices is about 500 people. There's a great organization called Canadians for Justice and Peace in the Middle East that's bigger, stronger, more visible and effective. There are organizations in most of the major churches. The Anglicans work on this. The United Church works on this. Recently, the Catholic Church works on it through their Development and Peace program. Smaller churches like the Mennonites, the Quakers.
Unitarian?
Thank you, Unitarians. Yes, some labor unions are on board with it. Very clearly, there are labor unions. And then I'd like to say there are Muslim organizations. There are Arab Canadian organizations. There are specific Palestinian organizations. If like 10 of us could get together, and we don't need to publicize it, we don't need to be doing demonstrations in the street, but if we could get together and do something like this, who do we talk to in our government? Who made the decision that Canada should give $2.4 million to the UN World Food Program for 140,000 people? Who made that decision? Can we talk with them before they do that next time, right? Besides our members of parliament who should be hearing from us and so on and so on. So that, I want to assign myself the project of talking with other organizations and trying to pull that together. I think combined, I think we have a lot of weight and we could have some influence. And like I said in the beginning of this little part of my talk, if we can move our government like that much, I'm not expecting a 180-degree turnaround, but if we can move the needle it's better than what we got now. And then it could possibly even get better. So I think with that, I'm going to wrap me up, call on Henry. And if you want to have questions and talk together, we can do that for a while, even though I know we're running late.
Thanks very much.